Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Ayal Yogev, who is the CEO and co-founder of Anjuna Security. Ayal, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I'm looking forward to talking to you because I always love talking to founders that are doing some groundbreaking things. And I love the cybersecurity world, IT, because that's where we are in the world today of computing in the cloud and living virtually. So give us a little bit of background on yourself, and then let's start talking about what you're doing in the world of security.
Sure. So very quickly about me. So I've been in enterprise security for the last 20 years or so. I started in the public sector. I was in Unit 8200, which is the Israeli equivalent of the NSA. And after a few years there, I moved to the private sector and spent most of my career doing product management in enterprise security companies. Most recently, I led the umbrella product team at OpenDNS, and after the Cisco acquisition, I led the product management team for cloud security for Cisco.
And from there, you made the jump to co-found this firm. What was it at that point in your career that came about that made you move from product development to a co-founder? Because that's a very big jump as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, no, excellent question. So to some extent, I always knew that I wanted to start a company at some point, and a lot of what I've done throughout my career was basically getting myself ready to that point. And essentially, what happened was that I sort of finally found a solution for one of the biggest problems I was running into throughout my career. I kept running into that same problem of not being able to secure data while it's being used, and I ran into that, working for the government. And I ran into that at OpenDNS and Cisco. And finally, my co-founder, Jan Michalewski, who I've known for about 20 years since my intelligence days. So he did his PhD at Stanford at the time. And he came to me with a solution for this problem. There was finally a way to solve that problem that actually made sense. And that's why we both started to jump in and start the company.
You mentioned a really key word, which is problem. And if you're like me, you watch Shark Tank a lot, and you hear that so many times. Whatever the product is, we were experiencing this. We noticed that it didn't exist anywhere out there, and so we created it. So let's dive into what that problem is that data breach and that kind of blip in security. And I noticed online that there's a press release recently that you guys are closing a long existing enterprise data security gap. So let's talk about that data security gap.
Sure. So the gap that we're closing is that you can't really use data and secure it at the same time. Anytime data is being used, it has to be decrypted. It has to be loaded into a place where essentially it cannot be protected at that time. And the problem this causes is that essentially anyone with access to your infrastructure, and it could be the employees of the company, it could be the employees of the public cloud that you're running on, it could be the government that might be coming in with a subpoena, and it could be any compromised accounts with that access. Once the data is being processed, it's not protected and they can have access. And that is a huge, huge problem for enterprises that causes a lot of, resources to be put in, both in terms of, employees and money and, security products to actually try to lower, to sort of close that gap, but there was never really a good way of doing it.
So these firms, now I am not in IT, so I am the curious outsider asking questions to clarify, because that sounds really interesting to me. Because I would suspect that these firms would be thinking in their mind, well, we've checked off the box. We've got all kinds of security protocols. But you're saying that while data is being created, used, and updated, like kind of live, real time, that's when the vulnerability is, even though you've got all kinds of other protections.
Exactly. There was never a way to really solve that problem. It's sort of one of these fundamental problems in the way that computers and operating systems were created. And what people used to do, again, I've run into that myself. So I'll give you an example. When I was at OpenDNS and Cisco, we had to basically do something called TLS termination, which meant looking into inside the traffic of our customers to make sure there are no security issues. And that essentially meant having our customers' private keys or encryption keys to be able to decrypt the traffic and look inside of it. And we knew that if those keys fell into the wrong hand, this would be disastrous for us. This is a huge obviously problem for any security company. So we needed to protect those keys. But because those keys were being used, there was never a really good way of protecting them. And again, we ended up spending a lot of resources, a lot of time, a lot of money trying to do the best job we could. And we've gotten to an acceptable point, but there was never really a way to completely protect them because at some point they're always sort of in the clear on some machine. And again, not only do we have to kind of continuously spend all those resources, we never could get to 100%
of protection.
Yeah, exactly. And again, this is a problem that enterprises run into over and over again with their sensitive data. It's, with their databases, with their, how they protect their encryption keys. It's always this problem that exists. And people know it's there. And that's why, that's why you essentially get breaches. That's why, you can never feel like you're 100% secure. There's this one gap that you just can't close.
And it might even be like the phrase I'm thinking of is like the back door. It's kind of like we've got all kinds of protections, but there's this little back door of while data is being used and updated that it has an opening potential for a breach.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
So let's think of, or let's kind of explore that a little bit deeper is what would happen, like obviously what happens if a firm, an enterprise does not do anything about it. Obviously we know the problem with data breaches, especially with sensitive data and credit cards and personal information. Well, what percentage of large enterprises that are in that scenario, what percent have you found in your research that may have that vulnerability and they don't even know about it? They're not saying, Ayal, that's all nice and fine and good. We know you could fix this for us, but we're not going to do it. That's probably not the case. They just don't know that it exists.
Well, it's funny. This is a problem that everybody knows exists. So it's not about not knowing it exists, it's about not knowing that there's a solution.
Oh,
and
very
part
good.
of what we're doing now is, the education piece of there's now an actual solution for this problem. And lucky for us, a lot of the large players in this market, the CPU vendors, Intel and AMD, and the large cloud vendors are adopting this sort of underlying technology. There's been a technology shift that now enables you to solve this problem. And it's being pushed or by these large enterprises, by AWS, Amazon, Microsoft with Azure, Google Cloud, and then Intel and AMD, and we're part of that sort of move to educate the market that there's now finally a solution for this problem.
So that's really exciting to me because in a psychological sense, you've heard this before where people don't know what they don't know. And you tell them something and it's like, wow, that's earth-shattering. We never knew that. But now that you told us, this is really important. You're saying that people know this. Enterprises know this exists, but they've always struggled with not having a solution. Now you have the solution. And now let's talk about this. How feasible, affordable, and implementable is this? So now an enterprise could hear that this is the solution and go, wow, well, the budget or the fee for this is so much that we may as well not even have the solution. So is this something that's affordable to protect as well as easy to implement?
Perfect. So you're touching right, sort of the heart of the matter. So let me take a step back and kind of tell you what, what changed to kind of make this possible to solve this. And then I'll tell you why, what we're doing as part of this. So what essentially has changed is that the CPU vendors, meaning Intel and AMD, have added a new technology to their CPUs called secure enclaves. And this is essentially a technology that allows you to protect the data while it's being used inside the CPU itself. And this has become a wide industry standard in the sense that, the CPU vendors have added support. All these sort of middleware, the hypervisors, the operating systems have added support as well. And now all the public clouds are supporting this. Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, and all the other sort of smaller clouds, IBM Cloud, Oracle Cloud, Alibaba Cloud, they've all either have added support or announced the plans of adding support for this. But the sort of issue became that it's extremely difficult for enterprises to use this technology. And I think the biggest equivalent or the best equivalent to this was, is virtualization and what VMware has done. The virtualization technology was part of the operating system for about 20 years, but it was extremely difficult to use until VMware came to build a software stack to just make it super simple for enterprises to use. And then, suddenly everybody started using virtualization, and that was, to some extent, the birth of the public cloud. We're doing exactly the same for this new secure enclave technology. The technology is there. The public clouds are adopting it. But for enterprises to use it, they would have to go and rebuild every application that they have, which, as you can imagine, is extremely, extremely difficult. You're not going to go and rebuild your entire software stack. And what we're doing is exactly like VMware. We build a software stack to just make it super simple to run any application inside of these secure enclaves in a secure way.
So from my uneducated in your industry, let me see if I can repeat back to you what you just said, because to me it sounds super exciting, where if you have a solution to a big problem that can save massive dollars and pain and suffering, that's wonderful. But if you then present it as a super expensive problem, it doesn't get adopted. Well, you've solved that problem. Secondly, it's you mentioned these similar technologies where people that are these enterprise companies will recognize, well, it's kind of like this, but here's what ours does. Now they go, oh, that makes feasible sense. So it's not something so new and so different that they kind of are skeptical. So they now realize that, wait a minute, you figured out a new way to do this, and it's similar to that. Okay, we're tracking with you so far. And then the biggest thing is adoption. So if you've got to then, kind of like if you build websites, if you've got to tear the whole thing apart and re-put it back together, you would be afraid that it would never go back together the same way, and you would have a disruption. Well, you are now able to say this can get implemented and integrated without rebuilding, and disrupting your flow of company processes. So now, I mean, in my opinion, I'm the buyer. I'm going, where's the other shoe that's going to drop? Where's the catch, right? Because this sounds like the perfect solution to a very, very large problem.
Yeah, that's exactly what drew me to the space and to start the company.
That's super exciting. So let's talk about now looking forward, because this right here then is a it's not necessarily a disruption like the Uber disrupting the transportation industry. This is just a big solution. Where do you see this technology going? Are there other applications that this could be used in, other types of protection and security?
Yeah, so that's actually to me the most exciting part. So to some extent, this new technology shift is, and again, I don't know how closely you follow security, but this is the biggest technology shift in security since the private-public key pair to some extent. And this public-private key pair, this is what essentially enabled e-commerce, right? Amazon, and what enabled online banking, and what essentially enabled trust on the internet. Now, this new shift with the secure enclaves, and this sort of goes beyond, but beyond what we're doing specifically at Anjuna. This is this technology shift that the clouds and the CPU vendors have added. This opens up the door to a bunch of these newer changes that will enable technologies that we just can't, we can only begin to imagine. One thing is, you can now place your data anywhere without having to worry about security. Right, one of the things that people talk about is a crowdsourced cloud, meaning people have all these access CPUs in their machines at home, or in their servers, And today, no enterprise would ever think about running on a cloud that runs in people's homes. It's just, the security is just, is not strong enough. But when you leverage something like this, suddenly this opens up the door to doing that. You can move sensitive data to locations where you never thought you can move them to. Right. So, for example, think about, connected cars, right? If somebody breaks into your car today, they might steal your wallet, but they're not going to have access to your personal data. Once you start having connected cars, this becomes a problem. So protecting that data, inside, or so if somebody breaks into the car, they can't get access to any of the data. That opens up the door to moving more data to the edge, the cars themselves, or to any other IoT devices. This opens up a lot of options in privacy. As an example, this allows you to do to essentially share data among different entities without actually, so basically running algorithms on data from different entities without anybody sharing the data from one another. The sort of one example of this is if you want to calculate something like a credit score. And every financial institution wants to contribute the data without anybody else seeing it. This opens up the door to doing that. Things like secure voting. If you're worried about somebody sort of hacking into a voting machine to either change the data or to see what people voted, this finally opens up the door to doing that in a secure way without people having physical access to the voting machines, being able to go in and changing the data. There's just a ton of implications to this, and to some extent, I'm only talking about things that people have already sort of identified as potential shifts in the market. This will go beyond this. Again, like nobody could, foresee Amazon being created when the private public key was created. I don't think we can even foresee how this is going to impact the industry.
Yeah, because of the prevalence of the Internet of Things and the connectivity that we have, this is now just the wonderful solution that'll really put your stake in the ground and make a name for your technology. But then now you start developing the next phase and the next phase of all these applications, and the credibility that you're building now is going to open the doors for all of these other solutions in protection. I just think that is spectacular. I just love hearing stories like that, because I just know that it is so helpful and going to prevent so many things that don't we all get the letters in the mail and the emails like, unfortunately, your data's been breached and you might want to change, and we're going to provide you with, at some point we go, well, man, what I don't know what I could do. Well, if you can prevent those things from happening, what a huge solution that is. So I just think that is I've really enjoyed learning about your firm. So let's wrap up here with what is the best way that people can reach out, learn more about Anjuna, and even connect with you, Ayal.
Perfect. So there's just one sentence on what you said, because I thought it was a very good point. I guess to me, think about security is not about preventing breaches. It's about security becoming an enabler. Is how you can use security to enable, newer technologies. And this is sort of the exciting thing about this piece for me. In terms of reaching out, so our website is anjuna.io. So ANJUNA.io. So obviously you can people can find, come to the website and learn more about what we're doing, and they can reach out at info@anjuna.io. And we'll be happy to, to send more material and, educate people about this exciting shift that's happening.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was really fun talking to you, and I wish you all the best in your work.
Thanks, Mike. It was a pleasure.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.